The room went so quiet you could hear the HVAC sigh. 12 floors above Market Street, San Francisco traffic shimmered in the late morning heat, and inside the glass-walled boardroom of Velisyn Systems, an acquisition worth 9 figures was supposed to pass like a handoff on a well-rehearsed play. The projection screen glowed with a blue slide. Final vote, TitanCore offer. Evelyn Hart didn't wait for the chair to call the roll. I own 54% of Velisyn Systems, she said, steady as a level beam. And I'm voting no, she hadn't raised her voice. She didn't need to. It hit the table like a dropped wrench, solid, undeniable, a clang in everyone's spine. Interim CEO Damian Rhodes froze mid-gesture, the capped end of his laser pointer aimed at a bar chart that promised synergies. He was mid-40s, tan, immaculate in a navy suit that said, "I read the Harvard Business Review on airplanes." His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The chair, a silver-haired attorney named Elizabeth Thornton, adjusted her glasses. "I'm sorry, MS. Hart." Evelyn slid a folder across the polished walnut table. "A documentation. Hart Holdings, LLC. Current as of last night. Majority ownership of outstanding Class B shares." "You can't," Damian started, then corrected himself, smoothed his tone into something measured and managerial. "What I mean is, there must be a misunderstanding about the capitalization table. This acquisition, this partnership, is an extraordinary opportunity for all stakeholders. We've discussed this at length with our advisory committee." "Stakeholders," Evelyn repeated, as if tasting the word. "You mean the people who build the product or the ones who build the slide decks?" A couple of directors glanced at each other. At the far end, a venture rep in a Patagonia vest nudged his phone screen to life under the table, reflexively texting. Elizabeth opened the folder. The conference speakerphone, still connected in case a director in New York needed to unmute, crackled with no one speaking. Outside the glass, a row of employees in hoodies and black jeans hurried past, trying to look anywhere but at the room where their futures were being negotiated. Damian found his footing. "Let's take a breath." He smiled the way consultants smile when they deliver surgery with scented anesthesia. "Evelyn, we appreciate the passion. But the math is compelling. TitanCore brings distribution, sales muscle, a cash infusion, and a plan to shutter R&D and absorb our platform after 2 quarters, Evelyn said. "I've read their term sheet, Damian. I know what integration efficiencies look like in payroll." A director with a diamond watch leaned forward. "Excuse me, MS. Hart, but how is it possible you hold that position without board disclosure?" "Because this company once needed saving," she said, eyes staying on Damian. "And sometimes saviors don't announce themselves." Damian's laser pointer ticked against his palm. "Again, if there's been an accounting oversight, we can cure it." Counsel has seen it." A voice from the back, Lucas Finch, Velisyn's outside lawyer in a gray suit that had known too many courtrooms. He stood, cleared his throat. "The documents appear in order." Elizabeth exhaled an almost bewildered laugh. "All right. Let's acknowledge we're in uncharted territory." Evelyn took a seat only after she'd said her piece. Her hands were still. The only tell was the vein pulsing at her neck, a small metronome of restraint. On the screen, a bullet list blazed: margin expansion, geo-to-market, cross-sell. "May I?" she asked, nodding toward the laptop tethered to the screen. Damian hesitated. "We have an agenda," he said, the words too soft to mask the edge. "We're at the vote." "We are," Elizabeth said before he could reclaim the floor. She tilted her chin toward Evelyn. "But if a majority shareholder is objecting, we will hear her." Evelyn's slide replaced Damian's. "No branding, no gloss. A table of incident tickets. Dates, times, outage minutes. Customer initials that every person in the room recognized. M Bank, D Pharma, H Logistics. Beneath it, a trend line that climbed the way you never want a trend line to climb. "Since we started the so-called acceleration program," she said, "defects are up by 1/3. Customer escalations by nearly the same. You removed guardrails because they slowed the demo. They existed to keep real people from eating outages during real work." A director in a cobalt blazer frowned. "Those are serious accusations. They're facts," Evelyn said. "You want projections? Here S1, if we push TitanCore's migration timeline, we'll lose our 2 biggest enterprise clients inside 6 months. And once they go, the rest will follow." "That's your cascade." Damian leaned on the table with both hands. "Evelyn, I respect your tenure here. Truly. But you've been close to the work. That closeness is a blind spot. This industry is consolidating. If we miss the window, we'll be eaten alive. Then teach me what I'm blind to, she said. Explain how a company that just posted a 96% retention rate is unviable unless it sells before Q3. Elizabeth's gaze flicked from the screen to Damien, then back to Evelyn. Is there more you intend to present today, MS? Hart, there's a lot more, Evelyn said. She clicked to a slide that was only a sentence, black on white. Ownership is responsibility. But I'll give Damien what he wants, an efficient meeting. Here's my position in plain English. TitanCore's offer undervalues the product, endangers our customers, and guts the teams that built this place. As majority owner, I will not approve the sale. From the speakerphone came a rustle, then a tinny voice, someone finally unmuted from New York. This is unexpected. Welcome to startup life, Evelyn said. Now it's real, Damien straightened, his smile gone. For the first time, his eyes looked unsure, dark with calculation. You have just made a very serious mistake, he said softly as if they were alone. Evelyn met his stare and didn't blink. Out beyond the glass, a minibus rattled past and a siren rose and fell like a breath. She felt the fear clawing at her ribs and told it to sit. Maybe, she said. Or maybe the mistake was thinking you could sell the house while the owner was still inside. The room held still, every person newly aware they were witnessing the moment the story changed. Elizabeth closed the folder and set her hand flat on it like a judge on a bench. Then we table the vote, the chair said. And we hear the history that got us here. The conference room had emptied 2 hours ago, but Evelyn still sat there, the echo of Damien's words. You've made a very serious mistake, replaying like a bad voicemail she couldn't delete. The skyline outside the glass walls was beginning to bruise, streaks of pink and gray bleeding into the bay. Below, Market Street hummed with the exhausted pulse of rush hour, people chasing Ubers and caffeine before the fog rolled in. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nate Brooks, head of QA, he's furious. Told ops to revoke your access pending governance clarification. You okay? Evelyn didn't answer. Instead, she slipped the phone into her bag and exhaled. This wasn't fear, it was déjà vu. She'd been here before, standing on the edge of disaster, watching the world she built dangle by a thread. 12 years earlier, Velisyn Systems had nearly died the first time. Back then, the company's office was smaller, carpet older, coffee worse. And Gregory Vale, her mentor, her friend, her unlikely champion, had been the heart of it. Gregory had hired her when she was a 30-year-old software engineer debugging code for a payroll system nobody cared about. He'd seen something in her quiet precision, in the way she didn't talk to impress but to clarify. You've got the rare disease of caring about how things actually work, he told her once, grinning over a bowl of microwaved noodles. That'll either get you promoted or crushed. Let's aim for promoted, he had kept that promise. For years, he shielded her from the politics that chewed through better people. Until the night of the launch party, 8 months before everything unraveled, when Gregory collapsed mid-speech. Stroke, 58 years old. She could still see the chaos. Champagne spilling, paramedics crowding, the board whispering words like interim, succession plan, optics. By morning, Gregory was alive but changed. His right side paralyzed, his speech a fragile patchwork of slurred vowels. The board moved fast. Too fast. Evelyn, said Elizabeth Thornton then in her neutral boardroom voice, will need transitional leadership while Gregory recovers. Damien Rhodes has come highly recommended from Meridian Capital. He specializes in restructuring. The word had landed like an anvil. She'd seen his type before, men who called layoffs, strategic pivots, and mergers opportunities to streamline. Still, she had nodded, told herself to trust the process, to protect what mattered, her people, the product, the culture Gregory had built. What followed wasn't restructuring. It was erosion. The first signs came quietly, budget freezes dressed as temporary adjustments, promotions delayed pending reevaluation. Then entire departments were realigned. A senior architect with 15 years of tenure was replaced by a fresh MBA who thought JavaScript was a financial term. Evelyn had pushed back, but Damien always smiled, always spoke in that soft, weaponized politeness. Evelyn, we're just trying to make Velisyn scalable, he'd said during one late meeting, the city lights flickering behind him. You build great software. Let me handle the grown-up stuff. It was the first time she'd felt small in her own company. Later, when she visited Gregory in rehab, he'd looked at her with a kind of distant sadness. His voice was thick, words swimming through molasses. "Don't let them sell it," he managed. As she promised she would. That night, driving home across the Bay Bridge, she'd pulled over halfway right on Treasure Island and watched the skyline glow behind her. Her reflection in the windshield looked tired, older than her 42 years. She realized then that she was fighting two wars, one against the corporate machine Damien represented and another inside herself, the part still terrified of being seen, of stepping fully into the power she already held. The next morning, she walked into the office like nothing had happened. But in her inbox sat a new notification, access to financial systems are revoked. As she stared at the screen, pulse steady. So the war had begun. Evelyn had always believed in clean architecture, in systems that worked quietly and visibly like good hearts. But there was nothing clean about the chaos that followed the 2011 financial crash. Back then, Velisyn Systems was hanging by a wire. Their biggest client, an insurance giant out of Chicago, had defaulted on $9 million in unpaid contracts. Payroll was days from bouncing. The board had panicked, investors scattered, and Gregory Vale, her mentor, still healthy then, had spent every meeting whispering the same exhausted sentence, "We'll find a way," except there wasn't one. Not until Evelyn found it. She'd spent that weekend alone in her small house in Walnut Creek, surrounded by spreadsheets, legal pads, and her husband Daniel pacing in the kitchen. Their daughter Emma was still in middle school then, asleep upstairs while her parents argued in low, sharp voices. "Evs, you can't," Daniel said, gripping a mug like it might anchor him. "You're talking about cashing out everything, the house, the 401k, your mother's inheritance." "All of it. For a company that's bleeding out." Evelyn's reply came quiet, even the way she spoke when she'd already decided. "If Velisyn dies, 300 people lose their jobs. People with mortgages, kids, health insurance. I can't just watch it happen. It's not your responsibility," he said, almost pleading. "It is," she said. "Gregory gave me this career. I'm not letting his company die because some banker got greedy." He stared at her, incredulous, and finally muttered, "You're going to destroy us." She looked down at the table, their kitchen table, with its scratches from Emma's old science projects, and said, "No. I'm going to rebuild something worth keeping." On Monday, she walked into Lucas Finch's office. The attorney had been with Velisyn since the beginning, calm, gray-haired, perpetually unamused by the drama of tech founders. She explained what she wanted: to buy out the majority of the outstanding shares through a holding company in her name. Lucas took off his glasses, polished them with a cloth, and said, "You understand what you're doing, right? You're about to own the company, but you'll never be treated like you do." "That's the point," Evelyn said. "I don't want to be treated differently. I just want to make sure the lights stay on." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "We'll call it Hart Holdings." By Friday, the paperwork was filed. Evelyn transferred every cent she had. When the funds hit Velisyn's account, payroll cleared. The servers stayed on. And a rumor spread that an anonymous investor had stepped in to save the company. Gregory suspected but never confirmed. He simply left a note on her desk that said, "Some people build systems. Others build bridges. Thank you for being both." She'd kept that note taped inside her desk drawer ever since. For 12 years, she'd said nothing. She wore no title beyond Chief Technology Officer. She ate in the cafeteria, debugged code, mentored interns, and never once hinted that she held the controlling shares. The secret was her insulation and her armor. But now, with Damien cutting off her access and reshaping everything Gregory had built, that armor felt less like protection and more like a cage. When she looked at the Hart Holdings documents one night in her home office, the numbers glowed back at her: 54.1% ownership. She whispered into the quiet house, "You wanted to build something that lasts, Greg. Guess it's on me now to keep it alive." For the first time, the weight of her secret didn't feel noble. It felt lonely, unbearably so. And outside her window, the bay wind howled like it knew what was coming. The first time Damien said the word optimization, Evelyn knew trouble was coming. It was during an all-hands meeting in Velisyn's sunlit auditorium, where the smell of burnt espresso and brand-new ambition hung thick in the air. Damien stood on stage, sleeves rolled, smile calibrated, the kind of man who could make a spreadsheet sound like a sermon. "We're entering a new era," he announced, pacing like a preacher. Velisyn is going to streamline processes, modernize our infrastructure, and unlock shareholder value through operational optimization. The engineers, half of them in hoodies, the other half in faded company t-shirts, exchanged skeptical glances. Evelyn sat near the back, arms folded. When she caught Nate Brooks' eye, he mouthed, "We're screwed." Damien clicked to a slide labeled Phase 1 Efficiency Alignment. The bullet points read like euphemisms for layoffs. Afterward, she cornered him near the coffee station. "You're restructuring," he smiled, that corporate half-smile that never reached his eyes. "Evelyn, let's call it refactoring. You know what that is, right? Cleaning up old code. Except this isn't code," she said. "It's people," he shrugged. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Over the next weeks, the so-called optimization swept through the company like a slow-moving virus. Experienced engineers were reassigned to innovation pods, led by consultants barely out of business school. Product decisions began coming from strategy frameworks, drafted by people who couldn't explain a single line of the platform's architecture. The absurdity bordered on satire. One PowerPoint deck proposed eliminating redundant QA layers, essentially removing the team responsible for catching catastrophic bugs. When Evelyn pointed this out during a leadership meeting, a consultant with shiny loafers and a $2,000 watch replied, "Maybe that's why we keep having bugs, because we have too much QA." The room had gone silent. Then Damien chuckled softly. "Let's stay open-minded, folks." That night, Evelyn stayed late. The office after midnight felt different, hollow, echoing. Rows of standing desks stood like gravestones, each lit by the faint glow of sleeping monitors. She opened the project dashboards and saw what she feared: deployment schedules slashed in half, QA gates skipped, cost reduction flags on every build. Her stomach tightened. These weren't just poor management decisions, they were accidents waiting to happen. The next morning, she walked into Damien's office. He was sipping an iced Americano, scrolling through his iPad. "Damien, you're cutting too deep," she said, dropping a stack of reports on his desk. "If we push these releases this fast, we'll break our SLA with every major client. You know what happens if TitanCore sees instability? They'll smell blood." He didn't look up. "What I know," he said smoothly, "is that innovation requires risk. You've been here a long time, Evelyn. Maybe too long. You're used to stability. But stability is the enemy of growth." Her jaw tightened. "Growth without stability is collapse." That finally got his attention. He set down his cup and leaned back. "Let me be clear. The board supports this plan. If you can't align with that, maybe it's time you think about what alignment means for you." It wasn't a threat. It was an eviction notice dressed as advice. Later in the cafeteria, Alicia Mendes from Customer Success slid into the seat across from her. "Word is he's bringing in TitanCore's old consultants," she whispered. "They're evaluating everything: systems, people, even leadership." Evelyn stared at her lunch without tasting it. "He's preparing a sale," she murmured. Alicia frowned. "You think he'd go that far?" Evelyn met her eyes. "He already has." That night, driving home across the Bay Bridge, the city lights glittered cold and distant. She realized the quiet protection of her hidden ownership was no longer enough. Damien wasn't just restructuring, he was dismantling. And she couldn't stop him from inside the system anymore. The only question left was whether she was willing to step out of the shadows to fight for the company she'd built. The lockout came on a Thursday morning, wrapped in the language of corporate courtesy. Evelyn swiped her badge at the door to Velisyn's data center, the heart of everything she'd built, and the light blinked red. She tried again. Red. She waited for the click that never came. Then her phone buzzed, access privileges updated. "Please contact it for reauthorization." She stood there for a moment, the hallway silent except for the hum of the servers behind the wall. She knew what had happened. Damien had finally made his move. By the time she reached her desk, her email had been rerouted. Project dashboards gone. Financial reports restricted. Even her engineering Slack channels showed, "You no longer have permission to view this content." It felt like a digital erasure, one that mirrored the slow erasure already happening in real life. Nate Brooks appeared in her doorway, clutching a coffee that looked as worn as he did. "You're out too?" he asked quietly. Completely," she said. "Every system I need to do my job." He nodded grimly. "They're calling it security compliance realignment. The consultant said too many people had unrestricted access. Too many people, she repeated, voice dry. Translation, the people who actually know what they're doing. Nate closed the door and leaned in. Alicia from Customer Success says her team got restructured overnight. They've pulled client reporting from her group. Everything's going through Damien's analysts now. Centralized control, Evelyn said. Classic acquisition prep. You make the place look efficient, not functional, he hesitated. Ev, you think he knows about, her heart kicked. About Hart Holdings, she whispered. Oh yeah, she shook her head. No, if he did, he wouldn't risk cutting me off. He thinks I'm just another department head with opinions, Nate sighed. Well, he's not wrong about the opinions part. That almost made her smile. Almost. Later that afternoon, she walked into a meeting she hadn't been invited to. She stood in the back as Damien spoke to a dozen managers, a PowerPoint titled Velisyn 2, a leaner, faster future glowing behind him. He was in full performance mode, pacing, gesturing, radiating charisma. Our engineering culture is strong, he said, but bloated. We've got redundancy in architecture, outdated methodologies, and excessive testing overhead. TitanCore runs twice our capacity with half the staff, someone murmured approval. Another took notes like gospel. When he finished, Evelyn spoke. TitanCore also had 2 major data breaches last year, she said evenly. Cut too many safeguards and you get headlines instead of growths, heads turned. The room went still. Damien smiled thinly. Evelyn, always good to hear from our resident historian. But we're moving forward. Appreciate the feedback. He turned back to the group, dismissing her without looking. The humiliation burned cold in her stomach. She led this company's technology for almost 2 decades, and now she was being treated like a crank interrupting a sales pitch. After the meeting, Alicia found her in the parking garage, hands trembling as she tried to unlock her car. He's setting you up, Alicia said. Everyone can see it. He's documenting missed deliverables, framing delays like they're your fault. Evelyn stared at the steering wheel. Let him, she said finally. Let him build his paper trail, Alicia frowned. You're not fighting back, I am, Evelyn said, starting the engine. Just not yet. That night she logged into a private backup system she'd built years ago, a hidden archive no consultant knew existed. Every email, every access log, every technical change over the last 6 months, preserved. If Damien wanted to erase her, she'd make sure he left fingerprints all over the crime scene. And as she watched the files begin to sync, Evelyn whispered to herself, You want a war, Damien? Fine. But I've fought one before. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary day that waits quietly before it explodes. Evelyn was at her desk reviewing internal notes when her backup monitoring dashboard flashed crimson across the screen. Then came the cascade, alerts, warnings, automated pings. Every instinct in her body went cold. Velisyn's main platform, the one handling billions of client transactions each week, was collapsing. She bolted from her chair and ran toward the operations center, her heels striking the tile like gunshots. Inside, chaos pulsed. Dozens of engineers stood crowded around monitors, showing a flood of red. The air smelled like stress and overheated coffee. What's down? She called to Nate Brooks, who was hunched over a keyboard, face slick with sweat. Everything, he said, not looking up. Primary database clusters are choking. Latency's off the charts. We're losing requests faster than we can log them. Evelyn's eyes darted across the screen. When did it start? 6 minutes ago. Right after the new optimization patch deployed, she froze. That patch, the one she'd warned Damien against, the one pushed live by his consultants despite her objections. Nate kept typing, muttering commands. Failsafe rollback S not responding. The system's looping through bad queries. It's self-replicating. Damien burst through the door, tie askew, followed by 2 consultants holding tablets like shields. Status update, he barked. Evelyn turned. You want an update? Your efficiency team just crashed our entire infrastructure. We're hemorrhaging uptime, Damien's jaw clenched. Don't exaggerate. Our redundancy layers were disabled to streamline resources, she cut in. You turned off the brakes and now you're surprised we're in a ditch. The room fell silent except for the beeping alarms. Damien ran a hand through his hair, trying to mask panic. How long to restore normal operations? If I had access, Evelyn said tightly, 40 minutes. Maybe less, he blinked. Access, you revoked my credentials last week. Nate shot her a look, part shock, part fury. You're kidding me, Evelyn shook her head. I'm not. Damien, give me temporary admin rights and I can fix this before it costs us our biggest client. Damien hesitated, eyes flicking toward the consultants. We can't break protocol mid-incident. Protocol, Evelyn's voice rose, sharp enough to cut glass. We're bleeding $300,000 an hour. That's not protocol, that's negligence. He looked ready to argue again, but another monitor flashed, client data access denied. SLA breach, Tier 1 customers. The engineers gasped. Nate slammed his hand on the desk. She's the only one who can fix this. Are you really that stubborn? Damien exhaled hard, jaw tight. Fine. Reauthorize her. Temporarily, Evelyn slid into a chair before the word temporarily finished leaving his mouth. Her fingers flew, commands, rollbacks, reroutes. The hum of the servers deepened, a low electronic heartbeat struggling to recover. Minutes stretched. Sweat stung her eyes. Then finally, one green light. Then another. Then a row of them, the platform stabilizing like a patient finding its pulse again. The room erupted in cautious applause. Damien forced a smile. Excellent work, everyone. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again. Evelyn stood, every muscle trembling. Oh, it'll happen again, she said quietly. Because the people running this place think systems are toys. Then she walked out past the glass doors, down the hall where her reflection followed, pale, furious, unblinking. Behind her, the engineers began whispering. In that moment, they weren't looking at the CEO's favorite consultants. They were looking at her, the woman who had saved the company from burning down while the men in suits argued about who should hold the hose. And as she stepped into the elevator, Evelyn realized something had shifted forever. The quiet technologist was done being quiet. The day after the outage, the office smelled like burnt nerves. No one made eye contact in the elevator. The Slack channels had gone silent. Damien's executive assistant sent out a corporate-wide memo titled Lessons Learned, Opportunity for Growth. Evelyn almost laughed when she read it, half hysteria, half exhaustion. $3.8 million lost in penalties, 3 major clients threatening to pull contracts, and he called it an opportunity for growth. By noon, she had already decided what to do. She met Lucas Finch at a cafe 3 blocks from the Velisyn headquarters. It was a quiet place with the kind of anonymity that suited confidential conversations, espresso machines hissing like white noise. Lucas arrived in his usual gray suit, tie slightly crooked, legal pad under one arm. I assume this isn't about lunch, he said, sitting down. Evelyn handed him a thick folder. The company's bleeding out and Damien's about to sell the corpse. Lucas raised an eyebrow as he opened the folder. You've been busy, I've been documenting. Every system change, every access log, every warning we ignored. Look at the timestamps, everything ties back to the efficiency program. I even have internal emails where the consultants admit they bypassed testing. He flipped through pages, his lawyer's face unreadable. This is comprehensive. You're building a case, I'm building insurance, she said quietly. When Damien takes this to the board, he'll say we're underperforming, that selling to TitanCore is the only way out. But these records prove it's sabotage disguised as strategy. Lucas leaned back. You're planning to reveal your ownership, aren't you? She hesitated. If that's what it takes to stop him, you've kept that secret 12 years, he said. Once you say it out loud, you can't go back to being invisible. You'll be the story. Evelyn looked out the window at the street, people walking, coffee in hand, their lives uncomplicated by billion-dollar power plays. I never wanted to be the story. But I also never wanted to explain to 300 employees that their jobs vanished because their CEO sold the company for a bonus. Lucas's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned, then turned the screen toward her. Board meeting scheduled, strategic acquisition discussion. Wednesday, 10:00 a.m., she felt a strange calm settle over her. Then I've got 2 days to finish what he started. That night, she stayed late in her home office. The house was silent except for the hum of her laptop and the faint sounds of her husband watching late-night news downstairs. On her desk, she spread out every document, incident reports, data graphs, system performance charts, even copies of Damien's memos. Each file was a weapon, but she didn't feel powerful. She felt tired of fighting in whispers, tired of watching arrogance wreck what diligence built. Around midnight, Emma called from college. "Mom, you still awake? You sound wired." "I'm working," Evelyn said, rubbing her eyes. "Big week coming, you okay?" "Yeah," she lied. "Oh, just doing the right thing even if it hurts," Emma laughed softly. "You always do." When the call ended, Evelyn stared at the folder with her name on it, Hart Holdings LLC. The paper felt heavier than any code she'd ever written. Tomorrow, she would finalize the evidence. The next day, she would walk into that boardroom and end this. But she also knew something else. Once she opened that door, there would be no going back to anonymity. She would either save the company or burn with it. The morning of the board meeting felt unnaturally quiet, like the air before a California earthquake, still heavy waiting. Evelyn stood in front of the mirror in her office, adjusting the collar of her blazer. Oh, she hadn't slept. Her notes were memorized, her evidence airtight, and still her hands shook. Not from fear, but from the weight of what came next. By 9:45, she was outside the glass-paneled boardroom on the 12th floor, folder in hand. Through the transparent wall, she could see the board members assembling. The finance chair with his silver watch, the venture rep in his Patagonia vest, and Elizabeth Thornton, calm as ever at the head of the table. Damian Rhodes was already there, rehearsing charm with two of the consultants, a sleek slideshow glowing behind him. When Elizabeth spotted her, she smiled politely. "Morning, Evelyn. Good to see you joining us," Evelyn nodded. "Wouldn't miss it." At exactly 10:00, Damian began. His voice was measured, persuasive, the cadence of a man who'd sold transformation to 100 companies before this one. "Velisyn's growth has plateaued," he said, pacing slowly. "Operational inefficiencies, outdated systems, and limited scalability have put us at a competitive disadvantage. TitanCore's offer is not just generous, it's salvation." The slides rolled by, graphs, buzzwords, projected returns. Evelyn could almost admire his precision. He built a narrative so elegant that truth itself looked inconvenient beside it. When the last slide read recommendation, approve acquisition $340 million, Elizabeth looked up. "Oh, thank you, Damian." "Any final comments before we move to discussion?" Evelyn rose. "Oh, yes. I have a few." The room turned, surprised. Damian's smile flickered. "Evelyn, this isn't the time for technical details." I'm not here to talk about code," she said, walking to the front. "I'm here to talk about consequences." She connected her laptop to the display, replacing Damian's pristine deck with her own, a single chart showing red trend lines spiking upward. "These," she said evenly, "are defect rates over the last 6 months. They correlate directly with every efficiency improvement we implemented. Here's the database failure last Tuesday that cost us $3.8 million. And here," she clicked, "are the internal emails from your consultants acknowledging skip testing protocols." Murmurs rippled across the table. Damian's expression tightened. "Evelyn, I'm not sure where you obtained those." "I obtained them doing my job," she said. "The one you've been trying to take away." Elizabeth leaned forward, voice low. "Oh, this is serious." "Are you saying the efficiency measures caused the outage?" "I'm saying they nearly destroyed the company," Evelyn replied. "And the man proposing we sell Velisyn is the one who made it happen." Damian's voice sharpened. "You're out of line." "No," she said quietly. "You are." The silence that followed was absolute. Evelyn reached into her folder and placed a set of legal documents in front of Elizabeth. According to corporate bylaws, any acquisition requires majority shareholder approval. As of this morning, 54% of Velisyn belongs to Hart Holdings LLC. "That's me." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a whisper from the far end, "You own the company?" Evelyn nodded. "I invested when Velisyn was broke. I kept it alive. I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want power, I wanted peace. But peace doesn't last when someone tries to sell your life's work out from under you." Elizabeth flipped through the papers, her expression shifting from surprise to respect. "The documentation checks out." Damian looked pale. "This doesn't change the facts. Velisyn is vulnerable." "TitanCore is counting on you to finish the job they started," she interrupted. "But the sale isn't happening." "Not now. Not ever." The boardroom was dead still. Then Elizabeth closed the folder gently and said, "Then that settles it. The acquisition is denied." Evelyn exhaled, slow and controlled. She won, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival. As she gathered her papers, Damien leaned in just close enough for her to hear. His voice was a whisper edged with venom. You think this is over? You just made yourself the enemy of every investor in this building. She looked him in the eye. Then they can get in line. And with that, Evelyn walked out past the glass walls, past the stunned faces, into a future she no longer feared. But deep down, she knew Damien wasn't done. And the war she'd thought she'd ended had only just changed its shape. 4 months after the showdown, Velisyn Systems was steady again, at least on the surface. The servers hummed, clients had renewed contracts, and the engineers walked with a lighter step. But Evelyn knew better. Calm wasn't peace, it was the pause between aftershocks. She had just finished reviewing the quarterly metrics when her phone rang. The name on the screen froze her in place. Damien Rhodes. Her instinct was to ignore it, but something, maybe the morbid curiosity that comes with unfinished wars, made her answer. Evelyn, his voice said low, uneven. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but this is important. Please don't hang up, her tone stayed cool. Make it quick, I found something, he said. Something I should have seen months ago, she almost laughed. You mean besides your own reflection? No, he said sharply. This isn't about me. It's about TitanCore. About what they did that stopped her. Go on. When I was at Velisyn, I hired a consulting team I'd worked with before to validate my efficiency plans. They gave me the sanitized version of the report, but after I left, I went through my old files. The full report was buried under an innocuous file name. It contained a section I'd never seen before, a risk analysis. It said your oversight was critical to system stability and that removing you during a high-traffic quarter could trigger catastrophic failures. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. You mean they warned you? I never saw the warning, Damien said. Because my chief of staff, Rachel Thornberry, suppressed it. She told me the report was routine. I trusted her. But that wasn't the worst part. After I resigned, I traced her communications. She'd been in contact with TitanCore executives for over a year. Evelyn, she was feeding them internal data the entire time. The air between them went silent except for the faint hum of her computer fan. You're telling me she sabotaged us from the inside? Yes, Damien said. They wanted to destabilize Velisyn, tank your valuation, then buy you out for a fraction of the price. And he stopped, his voice cracking for the first time. I helped them do it without even realizing it. Evelyn pressed her hand to her forehead, feeling the weight of every sleepless night, every loss, every argument. The outrage burned hot in her chest. You didn't just almost destroy this company, Damien. You almost destroyed people. Families, I know, he said softly. That's why I'm calling. TitanCore just offered me a new job, VP of Strategic Acquisitions. Same playbook, different targets. That's when I knew it wasn't coincidence. They're still running the same operation, Evelyn. You need to protect Velisyn. They'll come again and they'll come harder, her voice dropped to a whisper. You have proof, yes. I'm sending you everything. When the call ended, Evelyn sat motionless, staring out at the San Francisco skyline fading into dusk. The truth hit her like a delayed detonation. The war hadn't been corporate politics. It had been sabotage, engineered from the start. Within an hour, she was in Lucas Finch's office, the door locked behind them. She laid out the details as Lucas listened, his expression hardening. This isn't just internal misconduct, he said finally. This is corporate espionage. If we can prove it, TitanCore's in federal territory. Evelyn's throat tightened. Then we start tonight, Lucas nodded slowly. All right. But understand this, if you go down this path, it won't just be about saving Velisyn anymore. You're taking on an entire industry. Evelyn met his gaze, steady and unflinching. Then let's make it worth the fight. Outside, the city lights flickered to life. Evelyn looked out at them, each one a silent reminder that sometimes survival isn't about winning a battle. It's about discovering the war you've already been fighting. The investigation started quietly, the way all dangerous things do. Lucas Finch coordinated the effort from a secure office downtown, pulling in a private digital forensics team that specialized in corporate espionage. Evelyn sat through the initial briefing feeling both wired and hollow, as if every nerve had been replaced with voltage. The lead investigator, a lean man named Carter Hughes, opened his laptop and projected an email thread onto the wall. We've confirmed Rachel Thornberry maintained encrypted correspondence with TitanCore executives using a private Proton Mail account. Payments were routed through a shell firm called Velisyn Consulting, registered in Delaware. The trail's clean, but not that clean. Lucas leaned forward. How much money are we talking? Over $300,000 in 2 years, Carter said. All coded as consulting retainers. She's been feeding them internal data, system vulnerabilities, performance reports, even board communications. Evelyn felt her stomach twist. So the outages, the reassignments, the optimization, it was all part of a setup. Carter nodded. They've done this before. TitanCore has a pattern: weaken a company, leak its instability to investors, then acquire it for pennies on the dollar. She looked at Lucas. We have to go to the feds, he nodded grimly. We will. But Evelyn, once this goes public, there's no hiding. TitanCore is worth billions. They'll fight dirty. PR smears, lawsuits may be worse. I don't care, she said, surprising even herself. They tried to gut what I built, what we built. I'm done being quiet. The next weeks were a blur of subpoenas, interviews, and late-night strategy calls. Federal investigators moved faster than Evelyn expected. Emails were seized. Bank accounts frozen. The evidence stacked up like an avalanche waiting to fall. When Rachel Thornberry was arrested at SFO trying to board a flight to Zurich, it hit the news in seconds. TitanCore executive consultant arrested in corporate espionage probe. Velisyn's offices buzzed with the disbelief of a company that had just learned it was nearly destroyed by invisible hands. Engineers gathered in break rooms, whispering. For once, Evelyn didn't try to calm them. She wanted them to feel what she felt: righteous anger. The FBI agents questioned her for hours. She told them everything, from the first suspicious optimization memo to Damien's final confession. When she left the federal building that night, the fog hung low and silver over the Embarcadero. For the first time in months, she felt something close to vindication. Then came the call from Damien. I gave them everything, he said. His voice was steadier now, almost lighter. Emails, bank transfers, even recorded calls. They said my cooperation earns me immunity. I don't deserve it, but I'll take it. Evelyn was silent for a long time. You could have walked away, she said finally. Why help now? Because for once I want to build something that isn't for sale, he said. Maybe teaching other people not to repeat my mistakes is a start. She didn't know what to say. The man who'd once tried to sell her company was now helping to dismantle the system that nearly devoured it. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was something. 2 months later, federal prosecutors charged 4 TitanCore executives with conspiracy, fraud, and racketeering. Their stock price cratered overnight. The same analysts who'd once called TitanCore a visionary consolidator now called them a cautionary tale. Evelyn watched the coverage from her office window as dawn broke over the bay. Her reflection in the glass looked older, maybe tougher, someone who had seen how far power could rot before truth pulled it into the light. Lucas entered quietly, a mug of coffee in his hand. Oh, you did it, he said. Oh, she shook her head. Oh, we did it. And we're still here, he smiled faintly. That's more than most can say. Outside, the first ferry crossed the water, its wake cutting clean lines through the fog, the way Evelyn wished the future might look. But she knew the corporate world didn't reward heroes, it merely waited for its next story. Still, as she turned back to her team that morning, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not triumph, not relief. Just resolve, the quiet, unshakable kind that builds empires that refuse to die. Oh, the storm had passed, but it left debris. Even after TitanCore's collapse and the arrests, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that she was still standing in the aftermath of an explosion no one else could see. Velisyn was thriving again, its reputation even stronger after the scandal. Reporters framed the company as a symbol of corporate resilience, the David that outsmarted Goliath. But in the quiet corners of the office, Evelyn could sense a new kind of unease among her people. Success brought its own shadows, expectations, fear of slipping, the ghost of betrayal. She felt it too. Nights were restless, dreams looping back to the boardroom, to Damien's pale face, to Rachel's mugshot splashed across the news. Triumph, she discovered, could be lonelier than defeat. Then one Friday afternoon, her assistant knocked on the glass wall of her office. There's a doctor. Helen Fitzgerald on line 2, she said. Says it's about research. Evelyn frowned, picked up the phone. This is Evelyn Hart, a warm voice measured and precise. OMS. Hart, thank you for taking my call. My name is Dr. Helen Fitzgerald. I teach organizational behavior at Stanford, and I'm writing a book about what I call stealth stewardship, people who quietly protect organizations from self-destruction. Damian Rhodes gave me your name, Evelyn went still. Damian gave you my name, yes. He said your story changed how he teaches business ethics. I hope you don't mind me reaching out, Evelyn hesitated. Part of her wanted to hang up to move on. But curiosity edged past her caution. Go ahead, Fitzgerald explained her research, cases across the country where hidden owners, longtime employees, or unsung founders had secretly held the power to save their companies from collapse. You'd be surprised, she said. Most of them don't want credit. They just want to preserve what matters. It's a kind of moral architecture. Moral architecture, Evelyn repeated, liking the phrase. The professor continued, what makes your case unique, MS? Hart, is that you succeeded without revealing your ownership until the final moment, and even after you didn't cash out or consolidate power. You stayed in the trenches. That's rare, Evelyn gave a dry laugh. I didn't stay because I'm noble. I stayed because I'm stubborn. And because leaving felt like betrayal. Maybe, Fitzgerald said gently, but you also redefined what leadership looks like. You proved that power can protect rather than consume. That's worth documenting. They spoke for nearly an hour. By the end, Fitzgerald asked for permission to include Evelyn's story in her upcoming book, The Invisible Majority, Hidden Stewards of Corporate America. Evelyn agreed cautiously. But what she didn't expect came months later after the book's release. Emails began trickling in, then flooding from people across the country. A lead researcher in Boston who'd rescued her biotech startup from a hostile merger, a design architect in Chicago who'd secretly kept his firm solvent through the 2008 crash, a creative director in New York who quietly owned controlling shares of her agency but had never claimed the title of CEO. Each email told a variation of Evelyn's story, quiet protectors who loved their work more than the spotlight. She began replying. Sometimes just a line, keep going. You're not alone, other times long exchanges that stretched into midnight. They called themselves the Invisible Majority, and though they'd never met, they understood each other with the fluency of survivors. One night, Evelyn typed a message to the group, we don't do it for legacy. We do it so the lights stay on for the people who believe in what they're building. A reply came almost instantly, then maybe that's the legacy. She sat back, the glow of the monitor soft on her face. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone in the fight. Leadership, she realized, wasn't about being seen, it was about being there. And somewhere out in America, 100 quiet stewards read her words and nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. 6 years later, Evelyn Hart stood by the window of her office, the same one she'd occupied since before the first merger talk, before the sabotage, before the war she hadn't asked to fight. The city below was waking up. The clatter of delivery trucks, the gray-pink light slicing through the fog, the faint smell of roasted beans from the cafe downstairs. It felt almost peaceful. Velisyn had changed. The office was newer, sleeker, more open. Younger faces filled the halls. But the culture, the heartbeat of the company, still bore her fingerprints. The quiet integrity she defended through exhaustion and outrage had finally taken root. And soon it would continue without her at the helm. That morning, the board was meeting to formalize her transition. She'd asked to step down as CEO, handing the role to Nate Brooks, her trusted colleague and friend. He'd resisted at first, insisting, Evelyn, you built this. You can't just walk away. I'm not walking away, she'd said with a small smile. I'm walking back to where I belong. Her new title, Chief Technology Architect, wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It meant she could return to what she loved. Mentoring engineers, preserving knowledge, and designing systems that worked because people cared. When she entered the boardroom, the atmosphere was different from that infamous day years ago. No tension, no suspicion, just gratitude. Elizabeth Thornton, still poised as ever, stood to greet her. You've done something rare, Evelyn, she said. You proved leadership doesn't need noise to have impact. Evelyn smiled faintly. Noise has its place. I just prefer results. As the meeting concluded, she handed Nate a slim leather folder. Everything you need is in here, strategy notes, vendor contacts, a few pieces of advice you'll probably ignore. He grinned. You mean like you ignored Gregory's advice? She laughed. Exactly like that. After the board dispersed, she lingered a moment, running her fingers along the edge of the table. It was the same one where Damien had once tried to sell the company, where she dropped her bombshell and changed the course of her life. For years, she'd thought that moment defined her. Now she realized it hadn't. What defined her was everything she'd done after: rebuilding, forgiving, mentoring, staying. That afternoon, she returned to the tech wing. The engineers surprised her with cupcakes and a handwritten card signed by every member of the team. On the card's cover was a line one of them had printed in bold letters: "Ownership isn't about control. It's about stewardship." Evelyn felt her throat tight. Later, when the office emptied out, she sat alone at her desk, her old desk, not the CEO's glass one upstairs, and opened an email waiting in her inbox. From Damien Rhodes, subject: "Thank you, Evelyn. I wanted you to know I've finished my second year teaching business ethics at a university in Oregon. I tell your story every semester, not as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson in quiet leadership. You showed me that the greatest power isn't in taking control, but in taking responsibility." Damien, she read it twice, then closed the laptop softly. Outside, the bay shimmered like metal under the setting sun. She stood, walked to the window, and watched the lights flicker on across the city, small points of persistence cutting through the dark. She'd once fought to save a company. But somewhere along the way, she'd saved something else too: the belief that decency still had a place in business, that people could build without destroying, protect without dominating. As the last of the daylight faded, Evelyn smiled to herself. She'd never wanted to own a company. She just wanted to make sure it kept working. And after everything, the battles, the betrayals, the rebuilds, she finally understood: sometimes those are the same thing.